This is Voice of Independent Oromia, special broadcast in the English language. Besides its regular program in the Afaan Oromo language, Voice of Independent Oromia produces special programs occasionally to reach its English-speaking audience. By doing so, Voice of Independent Oromia aspires to educate and inform its audience on matters related to the Oromo nation and Oromia. This is Voice of Independent Oromia.
Hello and welcome to Voice of Independent Oromia. I'm Dabalataaf, and on our special program today, I'm joined by Professor Mohammed Hassan Ali to discuss Amhara genocide and ethnic cleansing claims in Ethiopia. Professor Ali is a giant when it comes to Oromo history. He graduated in African history from University of London in England and has been teaching history at Georgia State University in America for over 3 decades before he retired. He's published widely on Oromo in Ethiopia. To mention but a few, the Oromo of Ethiopia, a history 1570 to 1860. The Oromo in the Christian Kingdom of Ethiopia, 1300 to 1700. Here are some of the comments from his students we found online when we were reviewing his students' comments. I quote, "A wonderful history professor," end of quote. And that is really nice and sweet. One of his students speaks foremost when he wrote, I quote, "Honestly, the best history professor in history. Passionate, full of knowledge, sense of humor, and understanding. He's super inspirational and helpful, and most importantly, he makes history so interesting. Highly recommended." End of quote. We selected Professor Ali for this interview because among his many publications, one study he published in the Journal of Northeast African Studies in 2002, Conquest, Tyranny, Ethnocide against the Oromo, a history assessment of human rights conditions in Ethiopia, 1880s to 2002, is most relevant to our topic for today. Thank you, Professor Mohammed, for honoring Voice of Independent Oromia by making time to be the first guest on our special program in English. I want to thank you on behalf of our listeners.
Thank you very much, Dame. It's an honor for me to be among the first on this program.
Genocide is such a loaded word, and there's another related term, ethnic cleansing. The two terms are being thrown around a lot in Ethiopia. Claims and counterclaims are coming out. For example, the Amhara elites are currently on a campaign called Amhara genocide. Now, before we even get into our discussion today, please help our listeners understand how a killing event or a displacement event can be classified as genocide or ethnic cleansing. What are the criteria? How do the two terms relate to each other? And what are the differences and the similarities between the two terms?
These are all really good, timely, relevant questions. You are right. Genocide is highly loaded. In fact, in the case of Ethiopia, I think it is a term which is greatly abused. Generally, genocide is defined as a deliberate, I want you to underline this, as a deliberate, coordinated plan to destroy a people. It may be an ethnic group. It may be a religious group. It may be a national group. It may even be a racial group. There are two extremely important concepts that are involved in genocide, which is part of the crime of genocide. The first one is intent. Genocide is not something that happens on the spur of a moment because someone is angry with his neighbor. Killing the neighbor is not a genocide. It is just an act of killing. It may be a group of people killing others. That is really not a genocide. The Convention for Prevention actually says any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group is a genocide. And it has, acts of genocide has many aspects. I'll mention only a few.
I see.
Killing members of a group. I'll elaborate on this one. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. I could give you what is going on currently, actually, an example of that. You know, these acts that I have mentioned,
right,
that I have said, includes killing a particular group and causing serious body harm, includes inflicting traumas on members of the group through widespread torture, rape, sexual violence, forced, coerced use of drugs, or even mutilating population, like cutting arms, legs, or cutting breasts, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to destroy groups, include deliberate deprivation of resources, destroying crops needed for group survival, such as clean water, food, clothing, shelter, medical services. Deprivation of the means to sustain life can be imposed through confiscation or harvest or blockade. Why do I repeat this? This is what is precisely happening in Tigray now. Remember, the war started on November 3rd before crops were harvested. And that crop was never harvested. It was destroyed, either by the Ethiopian or mainly by the Eritrean forces. And the Eritrean forces currently block aid that came from outside to save the Tigrayan lives. That is a crime. The attempt to deprive people from food, basically subjecting them to cruel deaths. Dying by hunger is a horrible punishment. It is slow, extremely excruciating death that really comes through hunger. And now they say almost every day, a number of people, sometimes they say up to 100 people are killed off death. The American Secretary of State said, what happened in Western Tigray is ethnic cleansing. I will come to that point. And what is happening in Tigray, even Genocide Watch, you can Google and then see it, clearly describes the condition in Tigray as a genocide.
Professor Mohammed, if I may interrupt you for a minute or a second here, what happened in Tigray, especially in terms of preventing harvest during harvest time, that the world actually came to know or hear or see because of the conventional war that the Ethiopian government engaged in with the Tigray region, has been happening in Oromia for almost the last 3 years. In some parts of Oromia, government troops were and still are preventing farmers from harvesting and even farming, which is also resulting in human-made or man-made famine at the moment. But it is only underreported because it is underreported, and that's why the world is not talking about it. Would you like to highlight on that as well?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, since August or September 2018,
yes,
Western Oromia, the region of Wallaga, a greater part was under military command post, state of emergency, which was later extended to Guji and Boranado. Today, 10 zones of Oromia under military command, state of emergency, basically, when the soldiers can do anything they like. They can destroy crops, they can burn houses, they burned people, men, women, and the children with their houses. Not only burned men, children, and women, the soldiers were dancing while people were tortured to death with their houses. And under these command posts, young men are killed, and then their head cut, their hands cut, their legs, which is a crime against humanity. And then what is left is thrown in the forest to be food for hyenas. These are all crime against humanity. I did not mention it earlier, simply because these are crimes, serious crimes against humanity, because the war is going on in Oromia at low level, and it did not get international attention. If there is the media, remember in Western Oromia, for 4 months, as Colonel Abiy himself said, there was no telephone, no electricity, no internet for 4 months, during which people were really subjected to all kinds of tragedies. As you mentioned, they never allowed people to harvest, to plant, go to the market to buy or to sell. Essentially, the economy of the region of Walaga has been devastated. It has really been devastated. Something that never happened even during the time of the creation of the empire by Menelik, by King Menelik. There was not a time then when a daughter was raped in front of her parents, when a wife is raped in front of her husband. Only now, when young men and girls are killed in front of their parents. This is what is taking place in Oromia in many areas. Last month alone, in the last 4 weeks, 60, this is a documented, recorded with the names, with the dates, 60 Kairos, these young men, were taken from prison in different parts of Oromia. They were executed and their body were thrown into the forest. These were prisoners under the control of the government, which is a crime against humanity. They were taken out during the night, executed, and then thrown to be food for hyenas. This is in reality what is happening under the regime of Colonel Abiy, who has openly promised that he will dismantle Oromo nationalism, meaning he will destroy Oromo people. Essentially, what he said is he will destroy. Not long ago, remember during the demonstration in the Amhara region, they were chanting Oromumma Yudam, meaning Oromoness has to be destroyed. This is the intention. This is the intention. And we have to keep that in mind. It is not a genocide, but if this is carried out, it becomes a genocide. Definitely the attempt to, remember, crime of genocide involves one, intent, secondly, action. And because the second part is missing, that is why I am not at liberty to call it genocide. Definitely, it is mass killing that is going on in Oromia, in different parts of Oromia. Ethnic cleansing and genocide are not one and the same. Generally, ethnic cleansing is defined as an attempt to get rid of undesirable people or groups. This could be through deportation or through displacement, and sometimes even through mass killing. The purpose behind this is land. Please underline this. They wanted to remove particular group from a particular territory, which that group coveted as their own territory, or essentially the purpose is to create a homogeneous geographic area. The population may be destroyed in the process, or they will be removed. Remember, in 2017, the Rwanda Muslims from Myanmar, about between 500 to 700,000 population were expelled from Myanmar, and they are now living in refugee camp in Bangladesh, in the area. These are ethnic cleansing. Essentially, what the military leaders of Myanmar wanted is to create a homogeneous society there by driving out people who they have lived there for 150 years, and they have to be driven out from that area. By the way, in 2017, about 1 million Oromo nationals were displaced from the border area between Somalia and Oromia. Half of those population, no one knows where they are now. A crime of ethnic cleansing was committed definitely in 2017 against the Oromo, especially who lived in the border area. And about 150,000 Oromo nationals who had lived in different towns, cities in Somali regional state, all their property were confiscated, and they were driven out of Somali regional state with the clothes they had on their body. That was ethnic cleansing, essentially, that was committed against the Oromo. And the case of Bosnia is partly ethnic cleansing, but fortunately, the NATO and Americans actually prevented it from being carried out totally. Yeah. Ethnic cleansing and genocide are not one and the same.
Right.
Genocide is something that goes in stages, and it is intentionally organized, carried out by the state or agencies of state for destroying particular group, particular ethnicity, religious group, removing them from the area, essentially eliminating them, destroying them in whole or in part. And ethnic cleansing is removing them from the land, so that the group that claims the territory says we are now homogeneous. And if I may give you an example, a relevant example, remember in 19th century, the Muslim population in Wallo area, essentially the Muslims in Wallo were very powerful during that time, during the time of Theodros. Emperor Theodros conducted 10 years of war against them. Ultimately, Emperor Yohannes actually banned Islam under his control. Remember, during the time, what is today Ethiopia was not created. The Ethiopia of today was created by Emperor Menelik, by then King Menelik, later on Emperor of Ethiopia. And the banning of Islam was in historic Christian kingdom, historic Abyssinia. And for 10 years, there was massive war. Essentially, modern Ethiopia was really created, as Professor Tashalet Ibabu says, on the destruction of Oromo power. And that destruction first started in Wallo. 500,000 population in Wallo. There is a book on my shelf, Sostu as Eoch, in which 500,000 people were forced to convert from Islam to Christianity, and they had to change their identity. I don't know if I answered your question. Let me sum it up. Ethnic cleansing is carried out with the intention either to massacre or drive out people for the purpose of making the land homogeneous. Whereas genocide is defined legally, and it is punishable under international law, anyone who commits genocide.
For all of the genocides you just talked about, it looks like the government of the day consistently supported and enabled the perpetrators. In Rwanda, it is now widely accepted that the government of Rwanda armed and trained Hutu youth in combat in 1990, which ended up in genocide against Tutsis. Tutsis were actually identified with the rebel group Rwanda Patriotic Front, or RPF. In the case of the Darfur genocide, it is also now widely accepted that the Janjaweed were supported by the Sudanese government and frequently by the Air Force. Also, in the case of the Bosnia genocide against the Muslim population, Serbian paramilitary forces were supported by the government of the former Yugoslavia. Would it be fair to say that the perpetrators always have support of the government of the day, and the victims were those that the government was trying to defeat? I mean, in other words, could you actually commit a genocide without assistance from the government of the day?
Not really. An organized body, a group that is well organized, that has military force, police force, can commit genocide, but genocide is always planned, deliberate, and carried out. It is the state that usually, state or agents of the state, that carries out genocide. Remember, it is not without reason I said in human history there were many genocides that were committed. Most of those were genocide committed in the process of formation of empires or expansion of states that were committed. In Rwanda, it is greatly complicated, but what is clear is there are two people in Rwanda. Both speak the same language. Please underline this. And they are Bantu language speakers. The majority, about 85%, are the Hutus. The minorities are the Tutsis. Traditionally, the Tutsis were pastoral group. Remember, because of their cultural background, nomadic people are generally warriors. They have to protect their cattle from raiders and so on. During the European scramble for Africa, East Africa was given to Germany. What is today Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi was given to Germany. During the First World War, the Germans were defeated and their colonies were partitioned, divided. The British took Tanzania, which was then Tanganyika, and Rwanda and Burundi were given to Belgium. Just underline this. The Germans started recruiting the Tutsis, the minority, into their bureaucracy, into their military, into their police. And the Belgians continued with that tradition. In 1960, when Rwanda became independent, Burundi became independent, essentially it was the Tutsi minority in both states who inherited the state power. The majority, Hutus, were excluded, essentially, in many ways. In fact, this is not related to that, but there is now in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, there will be an election in Ethiopia in which the entire independent Oromo voice is eliminated. Just imagine the outcome of that. When a single independent Oromo who articulates about Oromo issues, Oromo interests, is totally excluded out of that. without knowing or deliberately, Colonel Abiy is creating a condition to that, that kind of things. When the political voice of people is utterly silenced, the result is always very dangerous. Let me return to that. And conflict continued from 1960 all the way to 1994. And then in 1994, it really reached its head. And the Hutus, at the time, the president was the Hutu president. And there was a liberation movement by the Tutsis that had the support from Uganda, from the neighboring country of Uganda. And the plane in which the Hutu president was flying was shot down. That really became the signal for the genocide that was carried out. Long before that, Hutu activists, the radio program, they started depicting the Tutsis as cockroach. Remember, genocide always involved dehumanization, removing the individual from the plane of humanity to something else. In almost 100 days, over 800,000, the estimate is between 800 to 1 million people were slaughtered in Rwanda. Most of them were the Tutsis. There were also significant number of Hutus who were killed because they were not strongly Hutus. In an environment of polarization, human beings are transformed into something else, dangerous killers, that kind of things. In terms of before the genocide in Darfur, let me mention the Bosnian genocide of 1995. Remember, Bosnia and Herzegovina became independent in 1992. The Serb nationalists really wanted to inherit former Yugoslavia that dissolved, earlier, and they conducted extensive attack on Muslim population in Bosnia, and that genocide was brought to an end by NATO bombing as well as by sustained American bombing, and that came to an end. In terms of Darfur in the Sudan, it was carried out by al-Bashir, who is now to be brought to International Criminal Court because he is condemned for causing that. And what al-Bashir and his government really did was to arm nomads known as Janjaweed because they wanted deniability. And the Janjaweed carried out, they were generally described as evil men on horseback. And they were given guns, artillery, all kinds of things. And thousands of Darfurians, people who were Muslim long before most of the Sudanese were converted to Islam, were slaughtered. And ultimately, it was only in 2008 when it started subsidizing, and individuals who were responsible for causing that crime, trust me, they are now in prison in the Sudan. They will be brought to international court. And those who are committing crime against humanity in Ethiopia, trust me, one day they will be brought to international court.
Now, let's come back to Ethiopia. The Amhara are demonstrating across the country against what they call genocide against the Amhara, in especially Oromia and Benishangul Gumuz. In Ethiopia, it is the Amhara that have the support of the government. They wage war against Tigray with the government of Ethiopia. They massacre Oromos in Wollo. They conduct mass killings of Matakel against the Gumuz people. The government of Ethiopia looks the other way or provides support to them. It is also working to dismantle the multinational federal order, which the Amhara dislike so much because it did away with their hegemony to some extent. In other words, the government of Ethiopia supports Amharas or Amhara-lets. How can anyone conduct genocide or ethnic cleansing against them? Is this a case of the perpetrator playing the victim card? What do you say?
Dame, that is really a very good question. Victimizing people and then claiming to be victims is a tradition that developed in many areas, and that is what is happening. You can't fight falsehood with another falsehood. The best thing all of us could do is to expose what happened. Who are the victims? Who are killed? No one should be subjected to displacement, to killings. No one should be killed unlawfully. But in the killings that took place so far under Colonel Abiy, before he came to power, most of the victims under APRDF government, as well as under Colonel Abiy, which is really a continuation of the same tradition, most of people who were victimized were the Oromos. But there were others who were killed, no doubt about that aspect. In March this year, starting in March, the Amhara militia, the Amhara Liu police, conducted a war in the Oromo zone in Amhara region in Wallo area. Yes. Many people, probably around 500 people, have been killed, and right. Thousands of houses have been destroyed. The schools, clinics have been destroyed. Altogether, today, over 300,000 people are displaced in that area in the northern Shawa. What is happening in Ethiopia under Colonel Abiy truly is very frightening. In Benishangul, about 400,000 people have been displaced. 400,000. But the indigenous population in the area, they don't have voice, they don't have the media, they don't have activists who can articulate about them. Who are killed there? It could be Amharas, it could be Oromos, Shinasha, this and that, but we hear only about the killing, displacement of one particular group, basically the Amhara, because they have the voice, they have extensive media, and their elites are highly articulate. They definitely mention this aspect. And the Muslims in Wallo, they don't have the voice. They don't have activists, they don't have media. Their plight and the suffering is not known. It is essentially the same thing in Benishangul and the Gumuz area.
The Amhara elites have been alleging many never before seen or heard kind of genocide events, where the supposed perpetrators, the Oromo, for example, were killed in numbers greater than those against whom they're supposed to perpetrate genocide, the Amhara. This was the case in death that followed the assassination of Hachalu, where, according to Ethiopian state media, of 239 killed, the Oromo constitute the overwhelming majority at 145. In a demonstration that followed the war, Muhammad's claim of security forces attempt to arrest him October of 2019, 86 people were reported to have been killed, of which 62 of them were Oromos. In almost all claims of genocide against the Amhara, nationals other than Amhara are killed in greater number. Do you think the world knows about these facts? If not, what can the oppressed nations in Ethiopia do to expose this subversive misinformation of the international community?
This is the project of Dr. Birhanu Nagga. Essentially, he entered the politics because of Oromo issue, as he said in his book, essentially. And what Birhanu Nagga told me almost 16 years now, In a meeting in London in 2005, he said, Oromia is meaningless. He was part of the Kenijit in 2005 election. He claimed they have won the election. Then he said, we will divide Oromia into 10 clusters. Now the plan is to implement that clusters. They think the Oromo people are back in the 19th century. They can easily be manipulated. They can, say, oh, we got rid of the existing federal system. Now we create a new one. The option the Oromo people have is to establish their own independent state. If the existing federalism is destroyed, there is no reason whatsoever why the Oromo remain within Ethiopia. Absolutely no. Because in the land where you constitute the significant majority, you can't rule yourself. The population that is larger than the population of Kenya, one of the largest in Africa, we can't use our language for self-administration while sharing the territory with everyone else. If our people are denied this fundamental right, they have absolutely no option. But every Oromo national should be committed to independent Oromia.
Absolutely.
Have always supported United Federal Republic of Ethiopia. I am an idealist. I always believe people can live together if they are allowed to administer themselves. The Tigrayans administering themselves in their regional states, the Amharas, the Afar, the Somalis, the Oromos, the Sidama, the Walaita, they can live together. They can live together. Now Colonel Abiy and his supporters are making it impossible, and consequently our people have only one choice. They have closed all options. No people are as tolerant as the Oromo. They call us Yuwa, which means really foolish people, naive people, because our culture is embracing people who have come from everywhere. They live in peace in Oromia. Remember, there is not a single Oromo national who has business in Tigray, not a single Oromo national who has business in Gondar, in Bahardar.
In Amhara region, right?
Yes.
Whereas there are millions of Amharas living in Oromia.
Yes, yes. People have lived together for a long time.
Very true.
If our people are denied the right to administer themselves, elect their own leaders. Remember that this coming election, the Oromo are totally excluded. What else do we expect from this government? Essentially, as I said, all options are closed for the restoration of glorious Ethiopia. The plan will really lead to disintegration of Ethiopia.
Regarding Ethiopia's future, it seems to me that Ethiopia is on a trajectory to hell. It is actually very scary what would happen if something doesn't give out soon. As Mr. Jeffrey Feldman said, Ethiopia crisis could make Syria look like child's play. I would add, Ethiopia's very likely oncoming disintegration could make the breakup of Yugoslavia look like a picnic. Am I overblowing it, Professor Mohammed? What is to give to avert this catastrophe?
Oh, that is a wonderful question. Colonel Abiy made a decision long time ago, almost 3 years ago, when he came to power. He promised the first time he visited Washington, D.C. area in July 2018. In the evening, he met with about 200 wealthy Amhara elites. There may be few Oromo nationals there. Few, I doubt if they were there. Anyway, what I heard from someone who was in that meeting, he promised them that he will restore the glorious Ethiopia, which means dismantling the existing federal system in the country, because the Amhara elite believe the federal system belittled them. They thought they were hegemonic, they were above everybody else. Everyone has to assimilate to their culture, to their way of life, to their identity. That is not acceptable to most people. And he thought if he had the support of the Amhara elites, then he will be able to destroy Tigray, he will be able to destroy Oromia, dismantle the federal system, and then restore all Ethiopia of one language, one culture, one national identity. That is the identity of the Amhara. Essentially, the policy of Amharization, assimilation, which was tried for 100 years, failed, and then it is a return. This is nothing but a recipe for a never-ending conflict in the area, in that country. Honest to God, for me, Ethiopia as a country exists only under the federal system. If that system is destroyed, already the plan is there. Everything is completed. They have already secretly prepared the constitution for dissolving the old constitution, a new one, 2 or 3 weeks after the election. That is what they are planning to do. And they have prepared a new map of Ethiopia, a new map that eliminates Oromia as the regional state. Basically, this is a return to pre-1991 Ethiopia, where the Oromo people were divided into 10 areas, essentially once again restoring the Ethiopia under which I grew up as a young adult man, under which it was not permissible to write, broadcast, preach, and teach in Oromo language. Even today, only last year, an Oromo Orthodox clergy preached in Oromo language outside Finfinne. He was killed on the spot for preaching that. In fact, today, you can't really, honestly, you can't say, I am a proud Oromo speaking Oromo language in Finfinne. Anyone, any hooligan could beat you up or could do anything. Remember, late last year, a girl was thrown from the 3rd floor of a building for wearing Oromo traditional dress. And it is really a return to old tragedy, and it is probably, how would I put it? Those who plan to restore all the Ethiopia are planning to dismantle what is today Ethiopia. Ethiopia will not exist without the existing current federal system. Mark my word. This is the crisis created by Colonel Abiy and his allies, Isaias Afwerki and Amhara militias, essentially. In fact, earlier when I talked about the ethnic cleansing, remember over 1 million people have been driven from Western Tigray. Where are they? Few of them, about 60,000, are in Sudan, in refugee camp. Others have moved into the interior. It is a typical example of ethnic cleansing. Yes. You wage war, drive out the people, confiscate their property. That is a typical ethnic cleansing. Under this circumstance, how could people live together? And now Colonel Abiy and Isaias are basically doing the same thing in Oromia, inflicting terrible tragedy on the Oromo population. I think if there is reason, common sense, the disintegration of the country can be avoided. But as things march on, with this election and then dissolving, trust me, it is only a matter of time before the whole thing collapses, which will be a great tragedy for everyone. No one will benefit from the collapse of the country of 110, 115 million people. Remember, refugees will flood into the Sudan, Somalia, Kenya, and then across. Once again, our people will become food for fish, either in the Red Sea or in the Mediterranean. It is a tragedy that is coming, unavoidable tragedy. It is a tragedy solely created by Colonel Abiy and Isaias Afwerki. Mark my words, a day will come when they will answer for this. Definitely when they will come. For the blood of so many people, the blood they shed, the destruction they implemented in Tigray, the destruction they are now carrying out in different areas of Oromia. Time will change everything. Time will come. And the way things are moving, you know, the major, honest to God, I don't think Colonel Abiy is a normal human being. They say he has mental issue, a very serious one. He wanted to quickly become a prime minister. He just wanted to, he can't be the king because there is someone who claims legitimacy to that. No one will really make him the seventh king. And all what he wants is to be the prime minister. And it is already rumored Dr. Birhanu Nagga will be the foreign minister. They have already divided power on paper, but we will see what that will lead to. The way things are moving, the future is truly dark, incredibly worrying. When thinking people are simply jumping into this unimaginable crisis that could be avoided, but those who are in power have huge responsibility, and a day may come, the lives that were lost, that will be lost, will not be restored. But one day, those who are the authors of this crisis, this huge tragedy, will definitely appear before International Criminal Court or in the country itself. Remember what happened to Derg officials?
You're absolutely right about that. Once again, thank you so much for your time, Professor Mohammed Hassan Ali.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope this is hope against hope. I hope the coming tragedy is not only for one, it is for everyone.
Very
It
true.
is in the best interest of all the people of Ethiopia if the country survives. To me, it survives only under the federal system. When that is made impossible, well, the option is very clear, absolutely very clear. Those who are pushing this agenda, they will be terribly sorry later on. We will see.
With that, I want to thank you all for watching our special program with Professor Mohammed Hassan Ali and say goodbye until we meet again on another Voice of Independent Oromia program. Until then, may you stay healthy, safe, and happy. Goodbye.